Welcome to Talk to OBN with me, Addis Asafat. Today we're going to discuss about the political polarities and disparities in political narratives in Ethiopia. And I joined by His Excellency Dr. Birhanu Lenjiso. To begin with, Doctor, you are academician by profession, but out of the blue you ended up a politician. What brought you to this segment?
Thank you, Addis. Thank you for coming. It is good to talk to you and to OBN again. The question, what brought you to politics? Probably the nature of the politics itself, but specifically the situation in our country, the political landscape in our country pushed us to engage in politics. The level of injustice and the level of atrocity that was happening in our country over the last few years actually pushed us to engage in political activism. That is how we started engaging in political activism. And at the end of the day, with the change, with the transition, we came back to sort of assist actually. Then I end up to be in the heartland. Otherwise, as you said, I spent most of my life in academics, in universities as professor and in international research organizations. I still engage in academics. I am teaching. I have PhD students. I also engage in research, although the level is relatively lower now. So some say we are actually blackmailed into politics. Anyway, we are pushed to engage, and that is how I end up in politics.
Okay, Ethiopian politics is characterized by huge polarities. And what are the causes for such polarities, and why political parties and those activists fail to come to a same single boat?
Polarization, I think, is very much the characteristic of the Ethiopian politics, especially since the establishment of modern Ethiopia. Beyond that, I think polarization is becoming a political trend globally, that people take things to the extreme just to sell informations. Some characterize this era as a post-truth era, and the most significant product that people produce, that people sell, that people consume is information. So in that process of information production, manipulation, people take things to the extreme, and that is a source of polarization globally. But if you specifically look at Ethiopia, I think the way we understand history in this country, the way we understand the process of state formation, for example, is the source of this polarization. If you look at, for example, how people understand the process of state formation itself, one group say the state formation is a healthy process, it was a legitimate process, because by that process the statesman bring ethnic groups that were dispersed together into a unified country. The other group say this process actually left a lot of wound and a grievance in this country. Or they say the state formation process itself is the source of all the evils in this country. So the political polarization in this country is basically between these two groups. It is not necessarily the state formation per se that is the source of this polarization, but the way we understand that process. One group say it is healthy, it is normal, it is legitimate, and the other say it is also the source of all the evils, all the grievances, and all the problems that we see in this country. So we can take the state formation, the process of state formation itself as a starting point, but we can say then maybe the incomplete nation building process in this country is a source of this polarization. Most state formations follow the same process. They have injustice, they involve a lot of wars and conflicts. But once the state formation process is complete, many countries engage in some sort of national dialogue, nation building process, and they come to agree on certain terms. They agree to forget certain things, and they agree to continue to move together, forward together on certain things. The fact is that we didn't do that. The fact is that we didn't complete our nation building process contribute to this kind of political behavior. So polarization, dualism, taking the extreme is very much within the Ethiopian political landscape. And it's almost a behavior of every politician.
Is that overstated?
No, it's not.
Okay, we have this transitional justice and national dialogue on board. You've said this state formation has reached here at this point, and it need to be backed by national dialogue and transitional justice. Yes. That's your argument. Yes. At the same time, we have these two mechanisms, the national dialogue and the transitional justice on board. Would these two things heal the existing political polarization and all the traumas that each nation experiencing so far?
Of course. Well, so the two, I think, somehow should be, there are areas where they overlap, but there are also areas where we should treat the two separately. Regarding national dialogue and the nation building process in general, at the end of the 19th century, when Ethiopia took its current shape with the expansionist war, obviously it involved a lot of bloodshed, and conflict. People still feel that. There are people who say we have a wound from this state formation process. The process of healing that wound and bringing people together to agree on certain things that represent the country, including the symbols, the national symbols. It is very important for countries like us to move together forward. Otherwise, some group in this country feels more honored, or they feel the state belongs to them, and the other feel this state inflicted conflict or a wound on them. So we have to heal that. And national dialogue is a process where the entire country come together through the representative or through other mechanisms to discuss about all those issues. Those who have wound, those who have grievances, should speak about their grievances, and we should listen to them. And then at the end of the day, we agree on things that we should forget together. Oh, this is a wound. This is a wound of all of us. This is not about making some group accountable and rewarding the other. It is about recognizing the wounds together and forgetting it together. Because we didn't do this, our history is still a point of contention, that we still have arguments and disagreements on how we understand our history. So national dialogue is a process of creating tangible and intangible thing is that the entire country shared together. After that, whatever the process, the state formation followed, if we agree certain things to forget and then to share certain things, and then we continue to move together as a country forward. But that has never happened in this country. There are times when national dialogue as idea come to the table and then disappear. It comes to the table mostly when there is a problem, when there is a political problem. But it is a very critical process of creating a stable country. State formation in this multinational, multicultural country without nation building, without creating this tangible and intangible things through consensus, it is very difficult to move forward together. Without having a common vision, without sharing a vision, without sharing a symbol, without sharing a common purpose and a common goal, there is no way that we can have a stable country that we all protect together, that we all say we belong here, that we all say this is mine, I should protect. So the national dialogue thing should have happened long time ago, like probably at the beginning of the 19th century and the 20th century. That should be the first thing to do. But because of various reasons, including less understanding of its purpose, the national dialogue and the nation building process has been suspended for too long, and we have to do it now. If we can't do that, and if we can't succeed on that, it is very difficult for Ethiopia to continue as a stable country.
Okay, in your recent tweet, you've said some people understand the concept of nations and nation state by itself has a problem. What do you mean by?
Nation and nation state, national, these concepts are very problematic, not only in our country, but elsewhere, in other countries as well, even in social science disciplines. The way, for example, we understand nation in sociology is not the same with other social science disciplines, legal and political disciplines. And when you bring that to associate that with nation state and other movements, it even gets very complicated. For example, in my discipline, a nation is just a group of people who share some sort of mutual loyalty, that believe that they belong together. And their belongingness is usually explained by their history, if they share history, language, culture, psychological makeup, and a territory, a geographical territory where they reside or they believe they have been residing. These are characterizing features of a nation. And at the beginning of 20th century, nation state has become a very, very important political concept. And a nation state is a state or a government or a country where a nation, a given nation, has its own government. One nation, one government. It is a type of state government where a nation and a state are at one. So nation means a country means a nation. That we call Beher in Amharic. So that is the concept of nation state. It basically, if a nation has a state, or if one nation has one country, then nationality and citizenship are going to be the same. Country and nation are going to be one. Hagar and Beher are going to be one. But in multinational countries like Ethiopia, globally, if you look, for example, people call country nation, United Nation. It is a place where different nations, different countries come together to have one, institution. But in this sense, under the concept of nation state, actually country and nation are the same. But under the concept of multinational state, for example, nation and country are not the same, because one country has a lot of nation in it. For example, we have about 80 nations in this country, and we belong to the same country. We still call it, commonly we call it a nation. But a nation actually represents this group of people, basically a cultural group of people that share culture, history, psychological makeup. So these things are very confusing, not only in Ethiopia, but elsewhere, even in social science discipline. The same goes to other issues. For example, when you say national dialogue, we just raised. By national, we actually refer to country, not a nation or beher in Amharic. So in Amharic, we have, for example, Hagarai Magbabat, country-wide discussion or dialogue. But when you say it in English, you call it national dialogue. So it's a bit tricky, but this comes from the influence of the concept of nation-state, where the assumption is every nation has a country, because nationalism actually advocates for self-determination of each and every nation. And at the beginning of 20th century, people, nations start to, make their own countries, or countries who have multi-nation start to, assimilate different cultural groups into one nation. But that's a failed concept now. We have multinational states everywhere. Most states in the world are multinational. And the usage of this concept, nation state, distort things. It hides more information than it reveals anyway, as far as I'm concerned.
I have once read your post that states, in quotation, the idea of modern Ethiopia was extensively developed by a group of early 20th century Ethiopian intellectuals, driven to a large extent by the cognitive dissonance between an inherited sense of cultural superiority and an acute awareness of Ethiopian backwardness. Can you substantiate this?
I don't think we need to substantiate more than that, but what I mean, we have these feelings internal. It is not only for the 20th century scholars, it is also common today. We are at times very proud of ourselves, including the fact that we have never been colonized, and the fact that we have our cultures intact. That's a very good thing. It is good to have your culture. But cultures, although each culture serves the same purpose, there is no developed culture, underdeveloped. Every culture serves the same purpose. Whatever my culture serves me, the culture of any other person serves that person. That's how we look at it. It's called cultural relativism. But if you believe your culture is superior in any way, it should give you a better civilization, a better way of life, right? So for Ethiopia, that is a problem. We are very proud of ourselves. We have a lot that we keep close to our heart. We like the fact that we are unique in many ways. But we have to also acknowledge that we lack many things that others have, right? So our culture or our cultural understanding or our world view in general should serve us to compensate for that. You can see this, for example, on certain things that we are proud of. For example, the fact that we won, that we defeated colonizers, is a very good thing. Colonizers who want to come, who want to erase our things, and they, want to replace our cultures with theirs, we say no, which is a very good thing. We are recognized for that globally, and we are also proud of it. But there are things that we should have achieved in a very similar fashion, but we didn't. Like, for example, defeating poverty, working hard, producing enough for ourselves, and probably participating in others' market. Expanding education, providing the necessary minimum education that our people need, eradicating the disease that is killing our people here and there. Those things are equally important. We have defeated enemy who come to defeat us through gun, but we failed to defeat other internal enemies, including poverty. So this cognitive dissonance, believing something and doing something, what is freedom, for example, if you don't fully get what you need? So this kind of conflicting things, paradox, that you believe something, but what you have is the opposite. Those things are very common in our society.
Okay.
In our intellectuals.
What's your commentary on inclusive leadership, though?
Inclusive leadership, I think, is especially for our country, not only our country, but if you look at the world right now, this is a year of difference, right? People advocate difference, or people want to be different. When we talk about difference in this country, people talk too much about cultural difference, about historical difference, linguistic difference. But people want to be different at individual level as well. If you look at the liberal countries, for example, there is something called expressive individualism now, right? That people want to express themselves, without any limit. I don't know if you read it. There are news that there are people who want to identify themselves as cat or some sort of vegetable. So this is a year of difference, a year of identity. People want to be identified in a certain way. So we still have this argument whether people should be identified with their nation or not, with their culture or not, with their language or not. The world went beyond that. People are now starting to identify themselves with animals, with vegetables. And that is what we call expressive individualism. When you are in this kind of society, or when this kind of, understanding or outlook or, attitude is coming, spreading through the world in a minute through social media, what should the political leadership look like then? How can you accommodate all these differences? The people want to identify themselves in different ways. They can keep changing it in a minute. Then the ideal kind of leadership in this kind of world is a very inclusive leadership. A leadership that is open, or that is at least informed that this kind of differences are there, and we have to open, we have to entertain, we have to accommodate. If you look at your own things or your group's interest, and you don't pay attention to the different ones, then it is not possible to give a leadership that the era requires. So inclusive leadership is like an open leadership or a leadership that is open to this kind of differences and the need to express those differences.
Okay, is Ethiopia entertaining inclusive leadership during this incumbent leadership?
I think that is what I understand. One of the things that this government...
Each nation has got its own representation?
Yes, relatively yes. But not only representation, because representation needs preparation and institution, framework of doing that. You know, you need to put many things in place, but in terms of tolerance, in terms of tolerating these diversified views, diversified self-expressions, identifications, this government, I think, is relatively open, even to the questions, for example, a regional question. Over the last 27 years, we had the same amount of regions that the Constitution started with. But after the change, I think we are having 3 or 4 more regions at least. You can look at it from that perspective. You can also look at it from this tolerance. I don't agree with over-tolerating, but tolerance is very important. If you say this is the thing, this is what the laws say, you should go like this, that's not going to work. This is a very dynamic era. As I told you, people sometimes want to express themselves in something that your framework doesn't capture. So you have to be open to those things, you know, considerate about their needs, about identity, basically, because identity is becoming the heart of politics. Politics today is very much about identity, about people expressing themselves, showing who they are, things like that.
Dr. Birhanu Lenjiso, thank you for your expertise.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Dear viewers, this brings you the end of our edition for today. Bye-bye. Have a good one.